Good morning to one and all present here. In this series of snippets titled Aurobindo on Poets and Poetry, the second literary personality of analysis is Edmund Spenser. Let us try to understand his poetic genius and source of inspiration in the light of Aurobindo. According to Aurobindo, if the essential law of poetry is to capture the spirit, then the question arises, did Spenser manage to capture the spirit in English literature in the 16th century Britain? We'll answer this question towards the end of the presentation. In the future poetry, Aurobindo states, I quote, "The Faerie Queene is indeed a poem of unfailing imaginative charm, and its two opening cantos are exquisite in execution. There is a stream of liquid harmony, of curiously opulent yet finely tempered description, of fluid poetical phrase and minutely seen image. For these are Spenser's constant gifts, the native form of his genius, which displays more of descriptive vision than of any larger creative power or narrative force. An inspired idea is worked out." Unquote. So, Faerie Queene, an epic poem, exemplifies both descriptive vision and an inspired idea in its symbolic rendering of virtues and vices personified as knights, queens and princesses. It is a typical example of allegorical literature to fashion a gentleman or noble person in gentle discipline. Each character in the epic poem represents a virtue or vice such as temperance, magnificence, married love, glory, chastity, holiness, falsehood, and so on. Aurobindo notes that in Spenser, the Elizabethan mind, I quote, takes the impressions of the surrounding physical world as hints only for a purely imaginative creation which seems to be truly drawn from a more beautiful and harmonious life scene that exists either within our unplumbed depths or on other subtler vital or physical planes. This creation has a name in it as things symbolic, and it tries to shadow them out through the magic of romance. Unquote. A religious and symbolic war takes place in this epic poem, and the war is between the good and the evil. The allegory of the good and the evil is symbolic as well as religious because it seeks to establish the true or Protestant church and destabilize the false or Catholic church. Queen Elizabeth I represents the true or Protestant church, and Mary, Queen of Scots, symbolizes the false or Catholic church. Back then, it was customary to dedicate works to one's patron, and Queen Elizabeth I was Edmund Spenser's patron. So it is no surprise that he dedicated his grandest work to Queen Elizabeth I and also praised her in the character of Gloriana. The Faerie Queene is the first epic poem in modern English, and it is also the first epic poem in modern English written in honor of an unmarried reigning queen. Aurobindo appreciates Spenser's efforts at making human figures the medium through whom the good and the evil play out their oppositions. But he simultaneously points out that these human figures, I quote, cannot be merely the good or the evil, this or that virtue or vice. They should stand for them as their expressive opportunity of life, not merely as their allegorical body. I unquote. Hence, these figures, unfortunately, in the hand of Spenser, remain vague and negligible. These are the words used by Aurobindo, vague and negligible, because they are at best romantic figures with the sole purpose of promoting the Protestant Church over the Catholic Church. So it is no small wonder that Aurobindo calls Spenser the poet of second magnitude of the time, and by the time he means of the Elizabethan age. There might have been another reason as to why Aurobindo called Spenser the poet of second magnitude of the time, and it is because even though Aurobindo says that the Faerie Queene has an unfailing imaginative charm, he points out that it did not come to a successful completion, and this Aurobindo considers to be a defect. I quote, a defect of the artistic intellect, a vice or insufficiency in its original power of harmonizing construction, characteristic of the Elizabethan, almost of the English mind. I unquote. This means that in Spenser's case, regardless of the life spirit being drawn from within oneself, or as Aurobindo calls unplumbed depths, or other subtler vital or physical planes, the poet Edmund Spenser failed to capture, I quote, that depth of profoundest substance and that self-possessing plenitude of form, which are the other and indispensable elements of a rounded artistic creation. I unquote. So Aurobindo says that for a higher significance in poetry, we have to wait. Coming back to the question which was posed at the very beginning, did Edmund Spenser manage to capture the spirit in English literature in the 16th century Britain? The answer is no. Although he succeeded in interpreting life and human beings as storehouses of negative or positive energies and feelings, unlike Geoffrey Chaucer, Spenser could not go beyond the ethical and religious implications of the institution called the Church. So Aurobindo says, I quote, his work was to have been in its form a rich and beautiful romance, but it must too be at the same time a great interpretation by image and symbol. Not here of the religious or spiritual, but of the ethical meaning of human life. A fairy tale and a vivid ethical symbol in one is his conception of his artistic work. End quote. So Aurobindo concludes that Spenser was a poet of, I quote, a high order, great in spite of an eventual failure. Unquote. Edmund Spenser is considered as the first memorable craftsman of modern English verse, although it is universally accepted that he contributed a negligible amount to English language. His vocabulary was largely classical and vague, according to Aurobindo, who states, I quote, Spenser in his experiments used all his sovereign capacity to force English verse into an unnatural classical mold. I unquote. In fact, after Geoffrey Chaucer, it was William Shakespeare who contributed new words into English language. Spenser's contribution as the first memorable craftsman of modern English verse is limited to the Spenserian sonnet, in which 14 lines are grouped into 3 quatrains followed by a couplet. With this, we come to a conclusion of the second literary personality of this series titled Aurobindo on Poets and Poetry. Thank you.